All right, Pete's sick. It's the fall time. Tournament season's over. We're going to talk about the fall transition on this episode of the OneCast.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. Huh? It's a toad, dude.
Yeah. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's going to be a bad day.
What's going on, guys? Pete with the OneCast here. So excited to announce our newest podcast partner, Carolina Waters. Carolina Waters is a performance fishing and outdoor lifestyle apparel company that's based right here in North Carolina. They provide clothing like lightweight UPF shirts for those days out on the water or in the field for your hardcore fisherman or athlete. They also have casual t-shirts for those more relaxing days. Tons of different styles of headwear for the whole family. No matter what it is you're doing, if you're doing it outdoors in the Carolinas or anywhere across the country, Carolina Waters has you covered. Be sure to head over to their website, check out the apparel, find what fits your needs at carolinawatersnc.com. For the month of September, use the code TheOneCast, all one word, to save 20% off your order at carolinawatersnc.com. Again, that's carolinawatersnc.com. Use the code TheOneCast at checkout to save 20%. Appreciate y'all. Make sure you check them out. Use that code to let you know that we sent you. Help us continue to grow a culture of anglers helping anglers, one cast at a time.
Welcome back to the fall transition show, folks. As you can tell,
you sound so excited about
welcome
that.
Back. Fall transition.
Welcome back. So, Pete, I'm sorry, man, you're getting over a cold right now, and it's a perfect time to talk about transition. But before we do that, head on over to OneCastFishing.com. Use the code TheOneCast to save some change at checkout. Get you some of those long neck hooks. Those are flying off the shelves, by the way. So, Ben, plus that stock up, and then get your hands on some of those snagless jigs. I put a hurting on them the other day on the lake. For some odd reason, they wanted to eat a big jig and not a small jig, which is weird. We're going to talk about fall transition, but go on there and use the code TheOneCast. You can save yourself some money. Get ready for the Christmas that's coming up. Those are great stocking stuffers, those snagless jigs, long neck hooks, weedless net heads, etc., and all the soft plastics that just came back in stock. Also,
that was a loud lip smack.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. Also, check out the nonprofit organizations that we like to highlight on the show: FX3 Inc., heroesharvest.org, and all the others that support the veteran community. Do our service members a favor. Donate any money if you have the possibility of doing that. Or just go to their pages, man, and follow them. They do a lot of great stuff for the veteran community. So every one of those guys appreciate your support. Anything from you guys?
Yeah, if you're looking for another cause to donate to, make sure you check out the family in Maui below. Lost everything in a fire when we had Maddie on a couple weeks ago. He recommended them if folks are looking for somewhere to donate. We also have a giveaway attached to that. So if you do donate, whether it's $1 or $1,000, whatever you donate, shoot us a image of your receipt. You can black out all the details other than your name, so we know it's actually you and you didn't just make a receipt. Not that anybody would do that, but shoot that over to us on social media. We're gonna have the OneCast hat, the OneCast shirt of our gear, which you'll be seeing. This will come out Thursday, hopefully Friday. We get that out to everybody. The hats are just about done as we're recording this, so hoping to have it. But we're gonna do that, and then Swamp Fox Custom Lures, who's a buddy of mine, and his fiance run down there in South Carolina, are going to donate some baits. They do custom painted square bills, things like that. If you follow us on social media, you saw Square Boy caught a fish on in a tournament over the weekend. They're going to donate that. So if you make a donation, screenshot the receipt, send it to us on social, and we'll do that giveaway. I'm going to set a time frame end of October. So we'll let that go through the month of October. So any amount, there's no set amount yet. We're asking you to donate. That's all going to a family directly affected. Going to let them get some fishing gear and get their kids back out on the water and doing what they love to do, which obviously is a big thing in Hawaii.
Yeah,
you're surrounded by water. I've been jealously watching Maddie's stories every day. He's like, "Oh, tuna tonight. Oh, mahi today.
Yeah.
Oh, he's just out here catching the fish."
Hopefully, he doesn't get any mercury poisoning or anything like that. So. But you're right, man. Like he's in a prime location to go out there and like do about as multi-species fishing as you can do. So I'm super jealous of him. Ben, what's going on in the world today?
There's a lot going on. a lot we're not going to talk about on this little program, right? No, but things have been going well. You getting back in major production mode and all, getting ready. You know, with the business, you try to get the inventory up during the fall time when fishing slows down a little bit, which we're going to talk about here. And then because trade show seasons, starts January through March, so you want to build everything up. So I've been thankful for the heat break. Knocking out all that product making, but so unfortunately, I haven't been out in the water too much. I will say, because I know we're going to transition and talk about the fall. I was out on my little dock filming videos for advertising for the product, for the jigs and soft plastics. And there were all bass starting to move up shallow because there were some 8-inch ones right around. And I tried to get them to bite the jig with the camera underwater, but they just swim away. But there's about a 2.5, 3-pounder or two swimming around too. And they hadn't been there for a couple months. So that is a positive sign that there is fish moving up.
Yeah. We got that. We got that cold night, man. That's all you need. You need that first cold night, and it kind of flips the switch. Flips the switch. That sounded weird in my head. I'm getting over a sinus infection, so I apologize for my voice sounding goofy. But so we fished a tournament Saturday, and got to see that the Thermocline's gone. That was the first thing I checked to make sure that was gone, because I knew if that was gone, it was on. Like the transition was starting. It was pretty obvious. We idle out to the mouth of this, I guess you call it a creek, before we blast off, because there's some houses in there and you don't want to just go blowing by there at first light and waking those folks up trying to be decent. And it was loaded with shad the whole way. Scanning. I'm like, yeah, they're going down. I caught, I don't know, maybe 10 fish total tournament day, and I caught them 8 different ways. So that's usually a pretty good sign when there's no hamstrung 100% pattern to catch them on, and you're just kind of junk fishing out there. But it was fun, and it's something that we talked about a little bit on our live last week, and we decided to make an episode because it's something a lot of folks, you start seeing the questions right online in the forums and stuff like, oh, where are the fish in the fall? I've been catching them here and they're not there. Like, where are they? Short answer, and we'll get into more depth. They're everywhere.
I want to add to that because I was on a tournament a few years ago. It was October, I think, up at Carr Lake, so Bugs Island. And I don't know if it was the extra during the tournament, or I think it was. That would make sense. It was a BFL, so I'm probably fishing my tournament on a Saturday too, not pre-fishing. But I had a little thing going on. Figured, they were on some points, some secondary points. I don't know how many people just blew by me, ran all the way to the back of the creek, pitched all the little laydowns, and then ran back out and never caught a fish. Mm-hmm. And because the old adage is, right, in the fall, right, when the water turns, go to the backs of the creeks. Mm-hmm. And that's not always the case, as we're going to talk about here. No, but the fall transition, well, I don't know if you exactly mean the transition, but after they transition, you were saying before we got on here, Trey, that it's your favorite time to fish, and it is my absolute worst time to fish for me.
Yeah, I think that so if you're an outdoors person in general, a lot of times you'll see majority of the people go to the woods this time of the year, right? And myself included. I love to whitetail deer hunt. I used to be an avid rabbit hunter, or a hare hunter, if you will, up in Michigan, and we used to chase rabbit all year long. It was a great time. We usually waited till shotgun season was over. After, I think, shotgun season up there is like November 15th, and it lasts 2 weeks. November 15th was always a holiday. We always got out of high school for that, which was really cool. But I've always been an outdoorsman, and but since getting into largemouth bass fishing, or bass fishing in general, the fall has always been one of my favorite times to fish. One, because I do have the luxury of just walking out the back door and shooting a deer if I wanted to, so I don't have to put that much effort in. But if you don't have that, the wakeboarders and the jet skiers, for the most part, aren't on the water at this point. Pretty much after, Labor Day? Yeah. They kind of disperse, at least here in North Carolina. I'm not going to say that's the case everywhere, right? Obviously, poor guys down in Florida, they're dealing with it all the time. But so I like the fall because it's less pressured from all watercraft. And
as you mentioned, there's less fishing pressure because
that's right.
There's less, like you mentioned, a lot of guys go to the deer woods.
So less recreational pressure, less fishing pressure, and the weather is just more enjoyable for me. much more enjoyable. Like, don't get me wrong, I love fishing in the dog days of summer because it's easy, right? But I think the fall for me does something internally where it challenges me to do things that I was habitually doing throughout the summertime, which is easy. It's like deep diving crankbait, football jig, big worms, drop shotting, things like that. At least on the lakes that I like to fish around here, like, you're not really diversifying that much. So the fall is a great time for me to go out there and work on new things. And I think the best way to frame it, though, is expectation management, because like Pete said, the fish are everywhere, which is cool because it gives you kind of like any option you want. However, they are eating micro shad at that point a lot of times. So it's really hard to target those fish. And we'll get into the other topic about targeting those fish. But yeah, so for me, it's a great time for me to go out and work on techniques that maybe I didn't work on during, the spawn, the post spawn in the summertime pattern. Kind of an example or a vignette to talk about is like, I didn't even have forward facing sonar on my boat until this year. I mean, I put it on late last year and I used it throughout the wintertime. But I'll go out this year in the fall and I'm going to work on things like the free rig. I've never thrown a free rig before. Well, I'm here to tell you it's been getting absolutely crushed on a certain lake. I'm not that great with a Demiki rig, so I'm going to go out and throw a Demiki rig. I don't throw glide baits. I'm going to go throw them. Now, I'm not going to go use those techniques only to get bit. I want to figure out which rod I need to choose for that application, what's line, what reel, how that bait and the action is in the water. So really for me, it's like 2-a-days prepping for the football season, right? And so I'm going to take everything that I learned, hopefully capture that, and then apply that for the next tournament season. I don't know if I'm going to fish a lot of tournaments next year, but we'll see. We'll figure it out. But yeah, so fall for me is fun. Less pressure, both recreationally and fishing pressure, better weather, and just different options in a way to like kind of hone in your skill set and diversify your portfolio. So that's why I like it a lot.
Yeah, it makes sense. It can be frustrating in the fall, but it can be really good. I mean, I've had 100 fish days in the fall and I've had 1 fish days in the fall.
I mean, my best tournament ever was in October.
Yeah.
So when I say I don't like fall fishing, I mean, there's been some amazing days out there, but generally speaking, like, fall is the worst time for me to fish. I mean, but
yeah,
you're right, Pete. You find the right thing, it can be absolutely amazing because those fish, I mean,
it's a lot of times fishing in the fall is, and it's cliche, but it's a grindy. Like you have to work to catch fish, and it might not be one pattern in particular that you're going to catch them all on, but it might be a area of the water where the fish are more active, or it could be a pattern. Like for me over the week, like the tournament on Saturday, I figured out early that they were the fish that I was targeting were feeding on bluegill. So like all my baits went to those colors and to those sizes, trying to meet that profile. And that was how I got bit. Other guys that I fished against caught them doing completely different things. Like,
yep.
And that's the fall in a nutshell. And like you said, it's a great time to learn because they get everywhere in the water column. You can still catch them in a deep brush pile, and you can catch them in 8 inches of water.
Yeah.
The biggest fish I got a hook into on Saturday was 3, maybe 4 pounds, was in like 8 inches of water. And they're everywhere. So if you want to work on shallow techniques, you're not super confident throwing square bills, especially square bill is a great bait this time of year because you can beat it around cover. You can match the size that they want to feed. Like Trey said, a lot of times it's smaller profile, and we'll get into a little bit of the science behind why and what their primary forage is this time of year. But then there's days and times like what I figured out, they were feeding on bluegill. They didn't care about that smaller forage. That's what those fish I was catching were targeted on. But it can be frustrating. So I see when Ben says it's his least favorite time.
Let's kind of talk about why the fall can be so difficult. So bait's part of it.
So much bait.
And we'll get there. Well, so let's talk about bait first, I guess, because over the late spring, summer, we've had hatches of either bluegill multiple times. You've had the shad spawn, and right, those new baby fish, those little minnows, whatever species they are, they're still very small.
Yep.
And there's just a ton of them because you haven't had the cold weather yet to have a big, shad kill or, bluegill kill, however, whatever species you're feeding on. Right. And so there's just a whole bunch of bait out there.
Those fry have also been in those protected areas. They've been,
and that's a good.
They've been shallow when the bigger fish were deep because of oxygen levels and things like that.
We know there's always resident fish shallow, but when more of the population is pulled off to cooler, more oxygenated water, they just have less predator fish until the fall. And so now in the fall, there's just way more bait. And now you're competing against actual live protein versus a piece of plastic, whether that's a crankbait or silicone on a jig or a soft plastic.
That's one of the things people need to realize is that bait, everybody talks about the fall feed, they're feeding up. They are, but they're feeding on that small bait. That's all this year's hatch. So all those bluegill fry, all of those shad fry, depending on the lake you're in. For us, it's primarily shad because that's primary forage in most of our lakes, and they are by the cajillions. I mean, I had a school. I was spot locked on Saturday in 22 foot of water fishing a point, throwing up into like 8-10 foot, and I had a school of shad come under my forward facing or under my 360, and it showed I was in 1 foot of water. So that school of fish was so dense that it changed the depth reading.
It's like going off a grass patch almost.
Yeah, almost like you hit a grass.
I've been at Jordan and Harris before in the fall, and on the opposite side, so the windblown side, scanning the ledge there, and there's this for miles it seemed there was this bait from the bottom of the ledge to the top of the water column, all the way down for miles. It seemed like it's like I got to find some other place to fish because you just can't compete.
Yeah, that's when you look for those other creek arms or whatever.
And another factor with this is that much like the fish move offshore a lot in the summertime in a lot of lakes. They get deeper where it's cooler, more oxygenated. They just remain more stable as a cold-blooded animal. The same thing happens in the wintertime. They want the oxygenated, the more stable water. So they pull out deeper. In the spring, they all feed up, like we hear about the fall feeding frenzy. There's the spring feed. Unlike in the spring, where there is a biological need for those bass to move shallow, to spawn, that is absent in the fall.
Yeah.
So those fish can literally be anywhere. If you're catching them in 20 foot in a brush pile, in late August, and you pull up there in September or October, and the fish are gone. If that was in the spring, a winter hunt, you'd be like, okay, there's a main lake point. Maybe I should pull up, or a secondary point. And you can just kind of hop your way back until you kind of figure out where they're at. In the fall, they could be in the middle of the lake.
Yeah,
that's right.
They could be pretty much anywhere. They're going to follow that bait around, and they don't necessarily have to go shallow.
Yep. And the bait goes everywhere, and the thermocline disappears, which is a big key.
Which means they can actually be deeper than what you were catching them all summer long.
I think when I talk about training, I use that term loosely because it's not like I'm a fishing athlete, but training or honing my skill sets. This is the time that you really can dial in electronics. That goes for any electronics. It doesn't have to be forward facing sonar, by the way. I went out so Sunday, which was, I don't know, 3 days ago or whatever. And I went out to the lake near us, and the thermocline's gone, right? Water temperatures around that 80-degree range. But fish were set up in all different patterns. I marked fish on side scan that were absolutely on the bottom, side scan in 2D. I marked fish that were, suspended underneath bait balls. And I initially went shallow, right? I had 5 square bill rods, casting rods on my front deck. And my initial goal was to go shallow. Now you'll find out relatively quickly if you're let me back that up. you may have to cover an extreme amount of water to find the fish when they're shallow in the springtime. It's not like, like in the spawn that they're going to be like every 50 feet or whatever, and they're going to be on a bed. There are certain areas that will hold fish. So like if you're going to, and that's the great thing about the fall is you can just dedicate, like you don't expect to get a lot of bites, but when you do get them, like you might want to stay in the area that you're getting bit in, right? Because it could be a concentration of fish. So it's a great way to turn your electronics completely off and just watch nature do its thing. Balls of shad swimming around, a bunch of balls of shad in one area, but then an isolated ball of shad maybe in the middle or the back of a pocket, and then they're being fed on by largemouth or whatever, right? Or it's a great way to don't have any rods on your front deck and go just play with your electronics. Right. So I think the world is yours. And then there's that, like, you know how it is, right? When you get on the lake and it's the summertime or any other time really besides the winter and the fall. And I don't know what it is about it, but like, there's this like unnecessary pressure that's on you to like get to your spot as quick as you can because you're scared someone else is going to like get on it and catch fish. In the fall, you don't have to worry about that. Like, it's not like they're going to be on your summer school that you're normally used to like picking fish off. So that's the other piece of the deal that really helps like alleviate whatever pressure, because we all do it, man. Like even when I go out on the lake, I'm like, all right, got to blast off and got to get to my spot. And, and I'm acting like I'm in a tournament. I don't know why I do that, but I don't do that in the fall. It's far more relaxed, but it's a great way to just do anything you want to do. With the expectation that you may not get a bite. So fall fishing itself can be fun, but it may not be fall catching.
I like how you put that with the expectations. It's all about expectation management, because when those big schools or little schools, depending on your lake, break up in the summertime, right, the fish are going to scatter. They're not going to be as concentrated. So you can take your time. And that's where, you can really put new techniques to work. You can learn your electronics. You can go out there and kind of dedicate that time, because you're not going out there expecting to hammer them like you would in maybe your summer offshore spots. Because you have that expectation, you're just probably more willing to go out and try new things and kind of read the water as it is.
Yeah.
Which is very important, I think, in honing your skills. To apply that in the future. Right. And you mentioned it, Trey, like the expectation is like, you may have to cover a lot of water.
Yep.
And I did want to say, like, if you're trying to use that new technique or learn something new, the expectations just don't become discouraged in the fall either.
Right.
Because sometimes it is just a very difficult time, especially if you're doing it right at the transition.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother thing we can get. You just got to find a different area of the lake if when that happens. But
the other thing that, a lot of times what I'll do, especially on a new body water, or even on the existing body water that I have a lot of experience on, this is when a lot of people, especially after Christmas, but even now until February, a lot of people are dumping brush piles in lakes.
Yeah.
Right. So I know there was a new thing found on said lake the other day, and it was like, that was never there before. So, again, not even with a rod on your front deck, you can learn so much about a lake you may have been going to for the last 10, 15 years. Guess what? You're not the only one that goes to that lake. And so people are constantly manipulating the environment on the lake, right? Storms, natural weather manipulates the environment. And then there's man-made stuff. And so like when you go out and you're like, man, that brush pile was never there before. Man, that Christmas tree was never there before, right? Man, 150 tires were never dumped in the back of that creek before. It's a great time to just learn the lake again, right? Because it changes the dynamic of the lake for the following season. Where you have caught them throughout the summer or maybe the spring, you might have found a gold mine for next year's tournament season if you fish tournaments or just fun fishing and stuff. So another great tip for everybody.
I will say one of my favorite things about fall fishing, even though it is my least favorite time, is I do love the topwater bite in the fall.
Yes.
That tournament I had was all topwater bite. The best tournament I ever had. It was in October. It was all topwater. I just have a lot more confidence though in topwater in the fall, probably because the water temperature and all. I just feel like it sets up better than obviously in the wintertime, probably not ideal. In the summertime, early and late, top water, we all know works. And if you get on a cloudy day, depending on the body of water, you can extend that out. And I know it works great in the spring. I just seem to have a lot more success consistently throughout the entire day. Like if I just wanted to have one top water rod on my boat, like I'm more confident putting a limit together in the fall, just doing that than any other time of the year.
Well, we were talking about this. I know Pete, you doing all right?
Oh, I'm great.
All right. We were talking about this before the show too. And while the bass, and this is just Trey's opinion, while the bass are feeding on, this year's hatch of whatever bait fish that you have in your body of water, it's kind of like when they're feeding on shad in the summer and that the big fish are underneath the smaller fish they're feeding on the shad. It still happens in the fall, right? So like if you find a group of micro shads, what I call them micro shad, little fingerlings and stuff, if you find bass underneath of them, the chances of finding a big bass underneath of them is good too, because they're still lazy. Like those big fish can be lazy. If they haven't moved to the bank or suspended out in the middle of like 500 feet of water or whatever, you still can catch them on big baits. I know this is the early transition or the early fall time, right? But a few days ago when I went out, they wouldn't touch a micro jig. They would touch a OneCast fishing jig, 3/8 ounce, but I could not get them to eat a small bait. It was weird. Like initially I would catch them on a drop shot. I would catch them on a Ned rig, a weedless Ned head from OneCast Fishing. I'd catch them on whatever. And then literally 2 hours into the day, I fished from 11 to 4, and 2 hours into the day, it went from eating drop shots and small 3-inch swim baits to they wouldn't touch anything other than a jig and a top water.
I wonder if all the crawdads came out on the bottom.
I don't know. Right. So,
because my neighbor, he caught one in his pond the other day and had a crawdad on his throat. I was like,
yeah,
crawdad patterns coming back, man.
So it doesn't mean that they're not going to eat. I mean, you think about it, right? Like big fish are lazy a lot of times, and they're also feeding up for the winter pattern, because in the winter they'll go, couple days before they eat again, and in between days you can get some fat football fish on some big baits. Just depends on what the fish are telling you.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, like, I'm the opposite of Trey. I don't use the fall to use my electronics, like to scan and stuff, like to find new structure. That's really what I use the winter time for. I use the fall to actually fish and like use those new techniques, different techniques, especially if you want to get comfortable using forward-facing sonar.
Yeah,
it's a great time of year to do it, because there's a lot of bait. There's a lot of fish under that bait. They may not be bass. You'll figure it out pretty quick if you fish for them and start catching them. But there's a lot to see, right? So it's a great time to see bait, to see fish, to see your bait, and to see how fish react to your bait, and to really hone in. And that's my plan for this year, is a lot of that, because I'm not very good with it. I've had it for a couple years now. I can use it enough to catch some fish from time to time, but it's a technique now, right? Like forward facing sonar is a technique and a skill in and of itself. And it's something that I need to learn to do. And I plan to do it in the fall, because when I first got it, I used it. I crappie, however you want to say it.
Succulate.
And that's not even fair to learn how to live scope.
Well, that's what I did, because you pull up to a school, you can see your jig fall, you see him react, you see him eat it. Oh, that's so cool. And you watch him,
Yeah.
You got a limit within 30 casts.
Yeah, it was like the best crappie I've ever caught in my life. I'm not a crappie fisherman at all. I just took an ultralight and a little jig, and I smashed it. I'm like, oh, these crappie guys are talking about this is the easiest thing I ever did in my life.
It makes because we've talked about it before, how life scope is just a tool. It's not going to force you to catch a fish. And the first time I had live scope and I took it out in 2019 or whatever, within 5 minutes I was like, oh, there's a fish, and I pitched to it, and I'm in like 12 foot of water. I'm pitching like into the bank, and boom, bass in the boat. I was like, well, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Come to find out, it's a lot harder.
Yeah. It's not usually like
it's
that.
usually not like that. That was first time. Beginner's luck within like 5 minutes of fishing with a new system. But yeah, it usually doesn't happen that way.
Most of the time it's fish running from your bait, or nosing down and not eating the 47 different baits that you throw to them. But it's a great time to learn your gear, and that is a piece of gear that a lot of folks have. If you don't have it, that's great. I mean, it's a good time, like Trey said, to learn your 2D and stuff, because those fish can set up. It's really easy to see bait balls. If you're not sure what bait looks like on side imaging or down imaging or 2D, it's a good time to do that. But for me, like, forward facing is going to make fall a little, I don't want to say it's going to make it easier, but it's going to help break some of that time down figuring out what the fish want. Because if I roll up on a bait ball and I look on forward facing sonar and there's a bait ball 3 times the size of this table we're sitting at and there's fish feeding on it, I'm just going to pick my troll motor up and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because you can't compete with that. And I've tried. You throw an A-rig through there, you throw every little trick you have, and you're like, oh, if I throw a fluke and it looks like it's dead, they're going to eat it. They don't want anything to do with it.
That's when you take a casting net out there.
Yeah.
You just go and seriously, like I have a buddy he only fishes live bait, but sometimes if you're just like, your head's down and you're like, man, I can't catch anything. It's like, well, just go grab some bait fish and that doesn't even work sometimes. I mean, even catching live shad that tend to die as soon as you hook them in the face, like they don't want the dead ones. They want the alive ones. You know what I mean? So
it's like that rule of or that, the reason that shad have so many babies or so many fry is because of safety in numbers, right? If we have 100,000 of you and 20,000 of you get eaten, well, 80,000 still made it. So they're not worried about.
I think it's more like 80,000 get eaten.
Well, probably, but you know what I mean. Like,
Pete's trying to be kind to the
I'm trying to be kind to our friend, the threadfin shad.
That going back to live scope, that's interesting. Where if you like, shallow water fishing, and that is your thing, and you do have live scope, and this is a great time to put it to your advantage. Because when I'm about to describe, I also apply in the spring too when the fish are shallow. But if you're going down a bank, you're in a pocket or cove, and you are, flipping lay downs or whatever you're doing, right? You're fishing from the bank, maybe out to 4 or 5 foot. If you're on a pattern, like if I'm on a pattern, like if I'm going into a tournament, like this is what the fish should be doing, I'll turn live scope off because I don't want that additional pinging there. But if I'm searching, practicing, I'll have that thing turned on. And so while I'm pitching to my targets, like I can scan around and I'd be like, oh, there's a break there. Well, they're standing timber out there, or there's like stumps out there, and there's fish moving around in 6, 7, 8 foot of water. So it can help you, identify where those fish they move a lot more in the fall to kind of see where they're moving at. And then you can try to go over and target and experiment, from there. That's a lot of ways how I would use it in the fall. Once I think the fish are primarily on the bank or maybe like that first break off the bank.
I think Pete brought up a really good point with learning what you're looking at. And I know that was a huge learning curve for me. And, everything plays a role in it. Are you running the right battery power to a forward facing sonar? Do you have the right, like I run a 9-inch screen. It's a pretty small screen. So it, my eyes are getting old. It plays some tricks on you. I'm not Rick Clunn by any means, but I'm getting up there in age. And I'm just kidding. No shade on Rick Clunn. He's awesome. But, there's a lot of things that play into it. But knowing what you're looking at on forward-facing sonar is so important, because if you're running a 9-inch screen like me versus a 2,000-inch screen like some of the other guys are running, they look very different. Like those blobs on your forward-facing sonar look very different. A rock looks like a fish depending on which unit you're running, so like, and then even the shad, and we saw this year when the three of us were out on, said lake, there were shad that you could make out, like individual shad, the size of them on the forward facing sonar. And then there's shad that just look like just a blob coming through the water. So like bass and some catfish, they kind of look similar, smallmouth and drum can kind of look similar, right?
A couple things with that. If you do see shad that are a little bit bigger and their separation is typically their threadfin shad? No, gizzard shad. Gizzard shad.
Bigger ones.
If you find gizzard shad, stay around them because that's usually where the bigger fish are. That's one of the things I've learned over the years from watching all the pros on the. If you find gizzard shad, it could be a great day out there. What Where's the second point I was going to make?
I don't know.
I don't know. What are you going to talk about?
Sometimes you're not going to know what you're seeing it until you catch whatever's down.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about catfish and bass looking the same. A year and a half ago, done a Lake Watery, probably an April, May tournament. And then there weren't really fish on the bank, super tough, post spawn. There were some fish offshore, but there's a bunch of bait, 15, 20 foot, right up on the surface. And you can see all these fish just schooling under them, like moving around like crazy, schooling. I'm throwing a spoon at them and any other bait I had I was like, I got to figure out what you are. And sure enough, I finally caught one on the spoon. It was about 10-pound catfish.
Yeah. If you think
about 5 pounds.
if you think other predator fish don't school, you're wrong.
They school, and
because I caught a flathead on a jig a few days ago, and I saw it on forward-facing sonar, and it was like thump, and I whacked it with a cash and flipping stick, not even throwing that rod in the application is designed to be thrown. And I pulled it up and I thought it was a 5-pound largemouth. And here comes this big, giant, brown, yellow looking catfish. And I was like, wow, you totally screwed me. You know, like
it's crazy. And on that particular day, there was 5 or 6 of these fish going from the bottom and 15 to 20 foot all the way to almost the surface to grab the shad and swim right back down like a bass often will.
Yeah.
And they were just big catfish down there.
And I have no idea. So crucify me if you will. But when in the cold season, right? I say cold season because not everyone gets like a real winter and stuff. But when the water is colder, I would have to assume that the clarity is better because the molecules are closer together, correct? In the water, like it's just more dense. Is that accurate? Like the air, does the water do the same thing? Either way,
water.
I don't know that question.
I
know
feel
cold
like
water is denser.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like the clarity on my forward-facing sonar is far better when the water temperatures are really cold.
I think a part of that is really a function of there's not as much pollen coming in the water.
That's true. Yeah,
there's probably less runoff, from like agriculture implications, right?
Yeah.
If it rains, it's still going to get rain, but there's probably less stuff going into the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting because water is typically clearer in the wintertime, and especially on the lakes that they draw down.
Yeah.
That's a part of
that's
it too.
Something we didn't talk about. The winter drawdown.
Well, we're talking about fall. I don't know when they start.
Well, yeah,
because they don't really draw down many of our lakes.
There's a couple of them that I think they pull. Don't they pull Car down Bugs Island?
Yeah, but that's a gar hole. Nobody.
But I mean, that's a great point, right?
Kidding,
so like,
typically it's your big core run,
like your
flood control lakes,
your TVA systems and stuff,
and like the White River system. But I think Bugs, right?
I think they do. I think they draw bugs down.
Yeah, and again, that's not the fall, but like you could even talk like early winter time. Like, it's another great way to get out in your body of water besides going through Google Earth Pro. And you start seeing things that you never saw during the season before because there's timber and structure and all sorts of stuff that's sticking out of the water. You're like, wow, that wasn't there. It was there the whole time. You just never saw it, right? So even if you don't have forward-facing sonar, it's a great way to go out and do scout reconnaissance applications and stuff. The only thing I'll say in the fall is, especially after November, depending on where you live, is be careful on the water. There's been numerous times because a lot of the lakes that we have, there's North Carolina, like public hunting land that's around them. If you're thinking about going shallow, just be cognizant, watch out for those orange vests and stuff because they're going to be slinging some lead at you. You know what I mean? Not at you, but they're going to be shooting at deer and stuff like that. And
I'm more concerned about the duck hunters.
Well, the duck hunters too. But that
they just let it fly.
Yeah. But I've there's been numerous videos I've seen on like, YouTube and stuff like that, where guys like take a gunshot right into the side of their boat. But it can be a dangerous time. It's also a cool time too, because if you're a big whitetail hunter or, I guess hunter is the right word. You can scout out some really good hunting land from your boat. Some really good hunting.
It's usually posted. but it's a good way to sneak into there because
Yeah,
they don't watch the water. They don't watch the water trespassing. I'm just kidding. Don't do it,
dude.
Good night.
like,
You
we
invade like the Navy.
already established this
Yeah.
was state game lands.
Yeah.
State game lands. Last year, I watched a guy. I ran into the back of a pocket, and the guy asked me at the ramp. He goes, "You going fishing?" And I was like, I feel like that's kind of a stupid question, but still, like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm going fishing. But him and his son jumped in their nitro and they blasted past me when I was fishing a bank line. And like an hour and a half later, I just see this nitro, like a really small nitro, like struggling to get across the water, had this giant 10-pointer like strapped to the front deck and stuff. And I was like, "Where'd you kill that at?" And he's like, "Oh, back there." And I was like, "Oh man, that's like one of my favorite places to bass fish." Like now I know, So yeah, I mean, it offers like a multitude of opportunities, but I think like dialing in understanding your equipment is so important, whether or not that's, you're running a 2-stroke engine on a John boat. It's important to understand that equipment.
Yeah.
Just as it is to understand like your electronics and whatever bass boat or whatever you're running. So
all your equipment's important, including the equipment you put on your body. So make sure you head to CarolinaWatersNC.com and check out their full line of gear. They got UPF shirts, they have hats, toboggans, hopefully some warmer hoodies. I know that they were planning around some designs, so those should be coming for this winter. They're our partner here on the podcast. So make sure you head to CarolinaWatersNC.com, check out their gear, use the code TheOneCast, all one word at checkout for the month of September. So this will be the last week. You'll save 20% off your order, and get yourself some gear because it's important to take care of your body, just like you're taking care of your boat and everything else. And having the right clothing makes a huge difference. And I know that any UPF gear is nice. It breathes, but it'll help keep you warm. Helps keep the sun's rays off you. So again, CarolinaWatersNC.com. Use the code TheOneCast. Save 20%. Yeah,
dude,
This is
that was a great segue, Pete. I have to say that because go ahead, Ben. I know. Go ahead.
Well, you think you know what I want to say?
I mean,
well, I was gonna say like you're gonna need that because this is the time of year that you're gonna have to go out bundled up in the morning.
Yeah.
And about 10 o'clock in the in the morning, you better start stripping down.
I
have a terrible habit of pushing it to as long as I can.
I do the same thing.
I want to fish.
Because you don't want to stop fishing.
I'll be sweating underneath. It'd be like 80.
I know.
It'd be 82 degrees, and I'm still in my my overalls and my hoodie because I don't want to take the time to rip them off.
I'm the same way. I do the same thing. You're like, man, it's hot. But you just keep casting.
And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, my overalls really stink.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, well, I can imagine why, because you're like 99 degrees of swamp beep below there.
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point in safety, right?
Yeah.
Safety. So a lot of people, including myself, I'm super guilty of this sometimes. Like on a nice warm summer morning, man, I will forget to throw that PFD on, that personal flotation device. I will rip down the water as fast as my little boat will go, just because it's warm. I know, like, probably not going to be a huge issue. Well, that's dumb of me. And especially in the fall and in the winter, when that water temperature starts dropping, you're out there by yourself. There is very few people on the lake now, so less people to help you. All the more reason for you to wear that PFD, but then wear that warm clothing, right? Like, you can get frostbite. You can get hypothermia very quickly. I mean, probably not frostbite too much down here, but it is a reality. And then you got to think of like, well, if I'm on a lake like, I don't know, Eufaula, Oklahoma, which is a massive lake, right? Or any of the giant lakes up here. If you die in the middle of the late fall and it's freaking freezing outside, not die, but I mean, your boat goes dead and you're stranded, you're going to wish that you had some of that good gear, right? So it is a safety consideration too. And I know, Ben, you hate it. Like, you hate being cold. I also don't prefer having my face freeze off when I'm running down the water either. I like the colder weather, but I know that it's important to take a good set of gloves, good neck gaiters. And you're like, the water is typically calmer now.
Yeah.
And we by no means are sponsored by a sunglass company, but you need to really protect your eyes in the fall and the winter time too, because you can get like sun, like your retinas can get sunburned and stuff in this type of environment. So, man, that was a good thing to talk about, Carolina.
Yeah, man, just wear your dang PFD. It doesn't matter what time of the year, how warm it is. I think Jordan Lake, local here has had 9 drownings so far this year, and of the 9, every single one of them could have been avoided if they had just worn a PFD. You can get them for like $9 at Walmart, probably cheaper. I don't know. I haven't looked at the orange ones in a while, but it might not be stylish, but it really does save your life. And it's paramount year round, but especially getting this cold water, and cold water shock's a real thing. And we'll tell my story one of these days about, about cold water shock and just about dying, but it's a real thing, man. And it doesn't matter how good a swimmer or whatever you think you are. Like you hit sub 80-degree water, and I mean, you can get anything below 98.6. You can technically get hypothermia and die, and it just takes a whole lot longer. And I have a buddy that works for Mustang Survival, and his primary goal is selling all that gear to SOF. So he goes around and does demos with everybody and sells that stuff. And he's a cold water immersion expert. And I might try to get Brian on to talk about it because he can tell you the formula. Like 60-degree water is like 30 minutes and you can have hypothermia.
Yeah.
So there's a whole thing. So just because you think, oh, it's bath water, I can swim, you can still not. You can get knocked out. Like Trey's ridden with me. I don't run my boat without my PFD.
No, he doesn't.
Like, I keep it
I'm
connected
way worse
to
than
my
him.
keep it connected to my kill switch, and I put it on.
Yeah.
It's just habit, like your seatbelt. I get in, I put it on, and then I go, and it's becomes one of those things you just do. But then I get in Trey's boat and I leave it laying in the center.
Yeah, he does that.
Yeah.
I do the same thing though. Like
it's so weird, man. It's so weird how because you're in your routine, right? That's another great thing about the fall is you can really start to dial in your routine to get in the habit. Like it's not just on the water, but it's everything with like expediting and making yourself more efficient, like with launching,
taking out,
doing all that stuff, like getting in. And this is a great time to do maintenance on all your trailers, your hubs, everything. And the last thing I'll say on the fall, in the winter, but mostly the fall because it's hard to catch them in the winter for me. This is a great time. Listen, this is a good time to put fish in your live well and take pictures at the end of the day. Like we do it. I don't like to do it in the summertime because the mortality rate of the fish, but like now they're a little bit more stable and they're a little bit more beefier and they got a lot more food in their belly and all that stuff. You can catch some big ones, especially if you miss the spawn. Like this is a time to catch some real big fat fish that are feeding up for the winter time. So it's a great time to get some shots and, get some pictures and not kill a lot of fish in your live well.
And fish a bunch of different ways.
That's it.
That's why I like it, man. Like I'll have 37 rods on my deck and I'll use every single one.
Yeah.
I might have 10 on it like in the summer and end up using 3, but this time of year you just roll through. And I don't know. What is your favorite fall technique?
Oh man. So I'm along with Ben. I think I talked about it on our Fishing Friday live, but I really like throwing a top water bait, like a pop R style bait in the fall. And if I'm not throwing a pop R style bait, I like throwing, like a mini micro jig, like 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce, because you can throw it shallow if you're going to fish shallow, and you can throw it deep if you're going to fish deep. So I like those two baits, but I'd say top water is pretty fun for the lake here, for the lake that I fish the most here. And that is not applicable to the other lakes by any means.
Yeah, if I had to choose, obviously any of the OneCast baits, but I'm biased with that. So besides those, it's definitely a top water, and I have no problem throwing that top water anywhere across the country this time of year.
Yeah.
It's probably my go-to in the fall.
Yeah. What about you, Pete?
Square bill. Yeah, I love picking up a square bill and just grinding. Just put the trolling motor on 6 and hit every lay down and rock pile and standing timber, and because most of the fish are feeding up, so that's even in deeper standing timber, 8-10 foot of water, I'll hit the tops of those trees with a square bill, and
that's something I need to do more.
Feed.
Square bill.
We talked about forward facing sonar, and this is a great time to like learn it, but this is also a great time if you do know it and you have used it. It's a great time to turn that thing off, because no matter this is my opinion, that thing is applicable when it's applicable, but it also is annoying to me sometimes. And so like, I'm looking forward to not even turning that switch on and just running some bank or just visually fishing for them. and it's a great way to like relieve some of that pressure of like staring at a screen all year long.
I think the two baits you see the most people say they don't catch fish on are a jig and a crankbait. And there's no better time than the fall to throw either of those two.
That's right.
And learn how to catch fish.
Yeah.
On a jig or a crankbait. Because
Especially a jig. Typically, I think the jig seems to shine a little bit better for me. Let me preface that. Early on in the fall, when you still have good numbers that are still hanging around the offshore spots, football jig's still going to work. But once you get through that transition, as there's a lot like more towards November here, there seems to be a little crawfish bite shows up a little bit more. And so, like, obviously, I'm always having a jig tied on my boat, but probably this time through late October, it's probably not the one I'm picking up first.
Yeah.
You know,
but how many times did we hear this during the Bassmaster Classic or at iCast or at any of the fishing shows we went to for OneCast Fishing? There's a lot of people that are deterred from throwing jigs. Either they've had no success with them, they've never thrown them before, or whatever the case may be.
Let me stop you there, because people have always, for 5 years since I started OneCast Fishing, and even before that, when it was just the YouTube stuff, right? But every time I go, people always ask, like, I've never had luck on a jig. How do you get better on the jig? Well, this is the time of the year, and then in the spring, to learn how to do it, because this is what I want you to do. If you want to learn how to fish a jig, put on a Texas rig trick worm, just go down the bank until you get hit in a good stretch. You get 2 or 3 bites, and you're in a good stretch. Put that thing away and put it on the jig, and just do the same thing. You're not going to catch as many, but you are going to catch 1 or 2, and they're probably going to be better. And it's just about getting that confidence.
It is
like that. This is a great time to learn how to fish a jig.
Yeah.
If you've never done it, this time through December probably, and then right before they spawn.
Yeah.
Right? So I think maybe late February through April.
Yeah.
Right. If you've never done it and you want to go down the bank and do it that way and learn and find a concentration of fish, it's just like a perfect time to learn how to fish a jig.
Yeah, you that definitely is a good point from both you and I just remember like dozens and dozens of people coming up to us at the show saying, I don't know how to throw a jig, or I don't like to throw a jig. And we told them like, hey, if you like throwing a Texas rig or you like throwing a shaky head, then you'll like throwing a snagless jig, right? Whether or not that's the flipping jig or the football jig, the swim jig, the bladed jig. But in this time of the season, like if you can pick up that flipping jig or football jig, if you can catch them on Texas rig, you can catch them on that snagless jig. And I don't want to ruin the winter stuff, because I think we need to have another episode where we specifically talk about like deep winter type stuff, which I know is a huge weakness for me. But I still like to run my boat. That way ethanol doesn't build up in my fuel, because I run cheap fuel. But yeah, it's a great way to get confident in any bait that you just don't typically throw.
There's only one bait you need in the winter.
What's that?
A-rig.
Between A-rig and forward facing sonar, baby, we got a whole nother show. But yeah, it is, man. So yeah, guys, you got anything else?
I don't. No, it was good. Good conversation. Lots of hopefully things for y'all to take away. If you have questions or anything, make sure you ask them in the comments, join our Facebook groups, all that. All of it's linked below. Make sure you check out those veterans charities. Make sure you check out OneCast Fishing, Carolina Waters. This is your last couple of days. Is coming on Thursday to register. If there's any tickets left for the kayak masterclass over at Cashin's headquarters, a couple pro anglers, 3 pro kayak anglers going to be talking. You don't have to be a kayak angler. They're giving away a ton of juice, including what I'm hearing is the other robo worm color that apparently is a big fish catcher on a drop shot. So Casey won't tell me. He said I have to come to the masterclass to learn. So he's gonna drop that juice. We'll be there. We'll have some TheOneCast hats and T-shirts for sale. We'll be hanging out, talking, catching up with everybody we know down there. So looking forward to that. And then our next adventure will be to NPFL.
Yeah, Lake Lanier.
Lake Lanier, the end of the
second.
October.
Or no, that's their last event. So NPFL's got Eufaula coming up at the end of this month, and then their last event for the season is Lake Lanier, and the OneCast will be down there rocking and rolling, doing some interviews.
See that AOY shield get lifted by somebody.
I know awesome. They might have to track me down, because I might steal that. And if Todd Goad is listening to this, if we're pulling for Todd. We're pulling for everybody, honestly, but Todd's leading, angler of the year for the MPFL right now. He's a few points ahead. Some of the other hammers that are right behind him, tailing him. We got some North Carolina boys in there. So, but yeah, we're excited for that. And please take these episodes and share them with your friends. I know there's a lot of people that like to listen to podcasts. This is a great way to, enjoy your drive to work, enjoy your drive home from work, and get yourself involved in the fishing community, because we're all about, helping anglers, grow a culture of anglers helping anglers one cast at a time. So what were you going to say, Ben?
Yeah, I was going to say, Trey, before you take us away with that, our little catchphrase there, this episode has been a little bit different.
Yeah.
We actually talked fishing in a sense that we talked about a seasonal change, and we haven't done a lot of, I don't think we've actually done in a single episode where we got kind of technique specific. We've got people all across the industry. We've had professional anglers, we've had biologists, we've talked about all the controversies going on. This is our first one where we talked about fishing and how we go about it during the season. So if you enjoyed this, drop a comment, send us a message, let us know if you want any topics you want us to talk about in the future. Drop it in our Facebook group so we can run our mouths about it too. And you can either listen to what we say or not.
That's right.
Yeah, we have no idea what we're talking about. But no, like Trey said, appreciate everybody listening, like, comment, subscribe, all that, hoopla that everybody says at the end of podcasts. I'll throw it out there too. But appreciate everybody and help us continue to cultivate a community of anglers helping anglers one cast at a time.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad. Son. It's a toad, dude.
Yeah. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.